I always call it the conundrum of the golden rule, which is to treat others the way you want to be treated, when really everyone wants to be treated differently. So the way you want to
Huh.
go about it is ask people, what's most effective and comfortable for you? How do you want to be treated?
That voice you just heard was Grayson Ponti, and this is Dragonfly Conversations. In this podcast, we highlight everyday people making a real difference in conservation and education. My name is Kevin Madison, and through my work with Dragonfly, I get to share their stories. Today, Grayson teaches us that inclusion isn't a checklist, it's a culture shift. He is the founder of ZANE and has visited over 150 zoos and is reshaping how these institutions support neurodivergent staff and guests. We talk about the limits of sensory-friendly certifications, the time Grayson got caught in a massive rainstorm in Borneo, and how to build a wildlife-saving ethic that includes everyone. All right, Grayson, it's great to talk with you. I wanted to start asking about your relationship with nature as a kid. For so many people, nature is a safe place, and I'm just curious, when you were growing up, what role did nature play for you?
Well, a lot of the way it played for me is through zoos and aquariums. So I was from Orlando, Florida, so of course we went on vacations and trips to normal places where normal people lived, and part of that was going to the zoo and aquarium in every city, and that's where I got to see that each one is different, that they all had a bigger conservation mission.
Mhm.
But I also, always enjoyed going to the ocean, going to the springs to see the manatees growing up in Florida. So
Nice. So, do you have a count of how many zoos and aquariums and everything you've been to at this point?
150.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a
And
hobby that's gone out of hand.
yeah, maybe, but is and your family was doing this though with you as a little kid, so there was commitment from your parents and everything too to make these
Yeah,
journeys.
it's interesting. My family wasn't a super outdoorsy family by any means, but like I said, I always was fascinated by animals, and they did take me to a lot of zoos, so I
Nice.
got hooked that way.
Yeah. Do you have any recollection of like an early experience, staring through the glass or the exhibit at any particular zoo or garden where you had that like really special moment with an animal?
I mean, there's so many with them. It's hard to pick. I would definitely well, I was very fortunate when I was 3 years old. Disney opened up the Animal Kingdom in our town and going on the safari ride. I don't remember the first time specifically, but that always had a big impact on me and wanting me to have that feeling of being immersed in nature.
Yeah, that's a good story. That I remember Bengali Express at the Bronx Zoo for me as a kid, and there's something about the rides too, right? The transport physically into this like slightly different space or a very different space.
Yes. Yeah, Bronx has had a big impact on me too. I went there a bit later in life, but yes, definitely, going to the gorilla exhibit there and Jungle World really showed me how zoos can have great conservation stories and really immerse you into it.
So you founded ZANE, which is Zoos and Aquariums for a Neurodiverse Ecosystem, and it has really taken off. I mean, I was so excited that Project Dragonfly is, I think you told us, was the 99th
Yep.
organization signing on as an institutional support. But it's incredible that you connected with so many different groups and really built this out. Was there something you saw going to zoos that made you want to do this project and to make it more inclusive? Was there a moment where you just kind of felt like, hey, there's more that can be done here in the zoo world?
That was much later in life. That was through my experiences working through zoos and aquariums, my lived experience, as well as other lived experience that I saw. I've always been a big advocate for neurodiversity and mental health. And something that I saw is that a lot of places knew were neurodivergent friendly, but didn't know how to be neurodivergent affirming, and that what they really needed is what I when we started Zane, we created a whole different approach from what like let's say a sensory certification where you get a stamp, where you get a recognition that like you're sensory inclusive. But from my experience, while that has its place, that what's more needed is to change attitudes about neurodiversity, to change the way people understand that everyone around them is different and how they show up in the workplace might be different, and that's a good thing. That it's actually a strength because people who are neurodivergent have unique skills like creative problem solving, attention to detail, pattern recognition. And really what we really want to go after is the effective change and helping people have the right attitudes so that they will be set up to be inclusive. Let me know if you want me to elaborate on any of that.
Yeah, I was just thinking like, if there's like a zoo director or a leader or a park staff person listening to this and they want to build that culture and make that change for inclusivity, but they're just like not sure how to, what do you feel is one of the first things they could do maybe with their hiring processes or even just with building that culture at that institution?
I would say a lot of it is learning what you don't know and really getting feedback from the neurodivergent people in your life. And if you don't, I mean, 1 out of 5 people is neurodivergent, so you certainly have it around you, but also reaching out to different communities and resources and finding ways to gain that understanding because all neurodivergent people are different. So it's important to talk to them. I always call it the conundrum of the golden rule, which is to treat others the way you want to be treated, when really everyone wants to be treated differently. So the way you want to
Huh.
go about it is ask people, what's most effective and comfortable for you? How do you want to be treated? Is a really good way to start. I'd also say having seek to understand is really important. And a lot of what of the approach I've done with Zane comes from my experiences being a conservation educator at different zoos and aquariums, where we want to go for that behavior change by connecting people to nature, getting them to have that wildlife saving ethic. And we've kind of used a similar approach to Zane, and I know it's can be frustrating because people want the secret ink, they want the formula. But really, there is no formula, and the best way to do is to give that effective attitude that's going to set people up to be as belonging and inclusive and welcoming as possible.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we all do seek that secret, single thing you can do. But like you said, it's never that simple. It is a conversation. And a lot of times people don't realize that 1 in 5 statistic you mentioned, the level of neurodiversity that is around them. And so initiating that conversation and just realizing that people have different ways of seeing the world and are available to discuss and then starting that out is great. Are there any things you're seeing just because you're so connected with the zoo world that you're really excited about that zoos are doing either for the culture we just talked about or perhaps even physical changes to exhibits or sensory things to make it more sensory friendly?
There's one zoo I can think of that, the Woodland Park Zoo, where instead of just having one sensory night, like the way a lot of
Mhm.
places do, they actually figured out that they can have sensory hours for their lights experience every single night because there's that sweet spot in the day where there's low attendance, there's low, the lights aren't too much, it's not too dark, where they can do it every single day. And I feel like we don't want to create special programs for special people. We want to create great experiences that can be enjoyed equally by everyone. I think that's a good example. I'm currently on the project team for an NSF initiative called Beyond Access, which is a first of its kind collaboration between zoos, aquariums, botanic gardens, science centers, and children's museums. That's really exciting, and it's working to create a best practice for neurodivergent affirming practice and informal science learning. So that's really exciting. So I see a lot of people wanting to do the right thing and using us to help them get there.
Totally. That'll be an incredible resource for sure. And I love that Woodland Park Zoo example. So, just for people that don't understand, like what is a sensory night or sensory times? What specifically changes at the zoo setting that makes it more inclusive?
So it means that there's quiet zones that think they're more sensitive in terms of like flashing lights and different overloads. But it's also important because there's also while there are people that are sensory avoidant, there are also people that are sensory seeking. And you
Mm,
want to try to design spaces that allow both to thrive and for people to make the choice. But generally, when places do sensory sensory evenings and or days and all that, they set them up so that they don't make it so you have to have loud noises or that you have to have a lot of like flashing lights and all that.
gotcha. All right. I'm sure we'll come back to zoos, but I also just want to pivot because we have a lot of educators within Project Dragonfly. And, I'm curious just as you've been thinking about your role as a conservation educator through your life, and for any teachers that have kids that are, have some students who are really into bugs or reptiles or nature and they want to support them, maybe they're struggling socially. I mean, what are some things you either have experienced or advise for just educators and teachers in general?
I really think that just as important as what you give as a teacher is what you don't take away from someone. And I think it's important that when people have passions and quirks, that we encourage them, that we nurture them. And I think that the best thing we can do as educators is to be sensitive to the people around them, try to really understand them for who they are and figure out what they need, while also not imposing ourselves on them because people don't always know what they need and people don't always sometimes people need the space to figure things out themselves, but I think that if we are there to encourage and to nurture as much as people want us to, we should be all for it.
Nice. Do you and again, it's sort of asking about your experiences as a kid. Do you had were there any teachers that you feel like looking back helped you along your path and led to you being this leader you are in the field now?
I would say one that really sticks out to me, and this is a project that's influenced my entire career, is my fifth grade gifted teacher had us do this research assignment where we could do it on everything, anything we wanted to do. And I did on zoos and aquariums. And that's the first time where I wrote to zoo and aquarium employees and got their perspectives. And I created this and we had to create this report. And and that type of free choice project-based learning really stuck with me and is really what I do my career in now.
Amazing. You did that as a fifth grader. You
Yeah.
wrote to professionals in the field. That is amazing.
Yes. Oh, so 12th my 12th grade and 11th grade English teachers also had a really big impact on me as they also rather than just being like try to learn for tests and all that, they were really interested in how I wrote, what my voice was, and really trying to get that out of me. And I think one thing that's hard about education is, people want, like I was talking about with people wanting the formula, people sometimes go for the pragmatic, like how am I going to pass this exam? How am I going to get a job? When really I feel like a lot of education is building those more effective skills. And like my undergrad degree is in English, which people probably wonder, like, how does this have anything to do with working in zoos and conservation? But it taught me the writing and thinking and communicating skills that have helped me thrive in this way. I think it's important to remember that there's no one right way to do anything. And that's part of what we're embracing with Zane is that as long as you get to the same result, it doesn't matter how you get there. Like if you work best working with headphones, work with headphones. If you work best in a quiet corner where no one can bother you, work in that quiet corner.
Right. That's, yeah, great advice and great teachers that you had and led to you being the accepting person you are that can see things from different angles. And so I also want to talk about the Global Field Program and Dragonfly in your life. You recently graduated, uh, just a little over a month ago, and it was so exciting to see you in Oxford, Ohio for the graduation with the global field program. I mean, what was that experience for you? What led you to the program? And I know you kind of created Zane as, I believe, as part of your coursework with the program. So maybe you can share on that too.
It was absolutely transformational. I had had Dragonfly on my radar for quite a while due to it being so connected in the zoo community and there being such a strong alumni base. And what drove me to it were two things. One was the opportunity to travel the world and to see conservation in action. Because in my experience working in zoos, we talk so much about conservation, but I really wanted to see it from the different perspective of actually in the field and from the point of view of the programs that we support and being like, how can we best support these people out in the field? The second part is I really wanted to fine tune my skills in engaging with communities, whether at home or abroad. And I and Dragonfly just completely changed me. I really got to see that all that goes into projects in the field because I feel like oftentimes in the zoo world we are like, okay, we'll give people these money and go run with it. Well, I saw in the field that there's so much more that happens. There's not just the researchers, but there's also the people who do the community engagement. There's the people who do the marketing and fundraising. There's the people who really focus on the community needs. And it made me realize that conservation is a much more holistic thing than I thought it was before. I also really benefited from having cohorts of people who I could have these conversations with and who we could push each other to really make change in our communities. And like I was alluding to earlier, it really helped me be a lot more thoughtful in how I ask questions and how I work with people to make change. And what really struck me with a lot of the field programs was seeing how rather than just trying to put a fence around and protect wildlife, that these people were really working with the communities, not for them, and partnering with them, and seeing how that local presence really makes such a difference in getting people to see how conservation benefits them. And that's something I've tried to take with ZANE is helping people understand this isn't just an act of charity. This is something that benefits our industry, and is actually not just good for our mission, but good for our business. And I really took that from Dragonfly. I started ZANE right in the middle of it, and it was very convenient that for my inquiry and action projects, I could in research I could do it all for things that advance ZANE, so it worked very synonymously in that way.
That's amazing and so great to hear. So I do have to ask, where did you go on these Earth expeditions?
I did Brazil, Namibia, and Borneo, and all of them have changed me forever. I fell in love with ecotourism.
Mm,
And it's interesting because my entire life has been in zoos. I feel like zoos basically uh, do a small version of what ecotourism does to people on them in terms of connecting with nature and helping them support conservation. Because when you do ecotourism, you're supporting conservation in these communities. And I feel zoos are a window to that. Ecotourism's the only thing that could ever tempt me to leave zoos, but there are two things that keep me in the zoo profession. One is the people and the relationships that I built over time, and two is knowing that ecotourism can only ever be a small fraction of the reach of zoos and aquariums. And I see zoos taking these transformative experiences that we've had in the wild and making them accessible for people to who maybe aren't going to do Dragonfly, who never would think to do something like that. But I see zoos as kind of the gateway.
yeah, I agree. And for me, growing up in New York, in the Bronx and New Rochelle, and going to the Bronx Zoo, that had a huge impact on me. In addition to camping trips in the Catskills with my family, things like that that got me out into nature. So yeah, I agree. They're zoos, aquariums, botanical gardens, even natural history museums. All of these contribute to this stepping stone for so many kids, and especially like kids growing up in city areas and in this day and age where everything's on devices, like getting out and walking in the jungle world, like you were saying, feeling the mist hit you as you walk into this immersive exhibit. I am curious with Earth expeditions, with all those trips you took. I mean, there is some intensity to that in terms of sensory as well. Also, I teach the India Earth expeditions, this backdrop I have behind me with these waterfalls. But India, from a sensory standpoint, is very, very intense. And I'm just curious, like, how did you cope with that personally? And do you have any recommendations for us as a program and instructors of field courses to make it more inclusive for people?
Yeah, I think the hard thing about going on an Earth expedition is that a lot of the supports and coping that you have in life is not there. Um you're in accommodations that are maybe not as comfy to you as you're used to. You're limited in the amount of food, the types of food that you have. Like when we were in Borneo, we were stuck at a research center, which was amazing, but also can feel a bit claustrophobic. But what I found really helpful is having a cohort of people and instructors who had empathy, who were all going for the same thing, and being like helping us adjust and really supporting us through that. I always really like the phrase safe but uncomfortable, which is something I feel like I felt on every single EE because it is a adjustment both in culture and in the lifestyle you build, but I've also as long as you've but I also felt very psychologically safe doing that, if that makes any sense.
That's great. Yeah, and it is an interesting thing facilitating these field courses is the awareness of from the student perspective, for as an instructor, we've often gone several times and you get to know what the flight's going to be like and what customs is going to be like when you're going through the airport and even the food issues. But we were all there first, for the first time once as well, instructors, students. So tapping back into remembering that and making it a safe place and acknowledging that discomfort, like you said, is so important. I'm so glad you had really good experiences
Yes.
with all that.
Um, like one experience that was definitely epitomized the safe but uncomfortable is on our first night in at the research station in Borneo. We were out on a night boat, and then we got absolutely drenched in this rainstorm, and we had to just run back together. We had to take off a lot of more of our clothes than we were used to in front of each other because they were just so soaking wet. And it was like this is probably not a very uncomfortable experience for everyone, but we were all going through it together. And I think the thing about being in nature is that it doesn't go off of your schedule or off of it decides what it's going to do and it dictates the environment that you're in and you have to adjust to it rather than it adjusts to you, which can be challenging, but it also reminds you that, we all are adjusting to the environment around us.
Yeah, you're right. It's nature is both such a lovely thing to learn from. It's not judging us, but it is unpredictable, and that is part of the magic of it. And it creates through those that rainstorm you're talking about, and I've experienced so many stories like that. These moments that to a listener might feel totally uncomfortable, like uh, going in and changing or finding a way to deal with being soaked in a group, but is such a bonding experience too, right? And so empowering when you get through those things together. Very cool. So I wanted to, just as we start to wrap up, I'm starting a new segment called Dragonfly Reflections. In Dragonfly, we love reflections. So
Yes, as do I.
So, I wanted to go back to Zane because it's so cool what you're doing with, affirming neurodiversity, like you said, not just making it a safe place, but an affirming place, for neurodiversity in zoos and aquariums. But is there a moment so far with Zane that you are most proud of, or something that you're just like, wow, this moment where you felt like this is really hitting and affecting people in this very powerful way?
I would say it was the first AZA annual conference, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, after we launched, which was about 11 months into it. And we had our big reception, and we ran out of drink tickets within 20 minutes, and we gave out the buttons, and we had people wearing them on the stage, and just really realizing that, and also. that this is means a lot to people and that it really resonates with them. And having people who I'd never met before come up with me and say that, oh, I'm neurodivergent and I've never felt comfortable talking about this. Well, now I do. And that culture change definitely really stuck with me.
Yeah. Which meeting was that at?
That was Tampa.
Okay. So that was just this last,
Yep, in
right?
September.
Yeah.
And we have big plans for anyone coming to AZA. We have big plans for both Atlanta in the spring and Portland in the fall. So hope to see you there.
Okay, definitely. Grayson, you are fairly easy to find because I often see you sort of walking with a group of people that are excitedly talking, and you also have all the buttons and all the swag from ZANE, and you also were kind to wear some dragonfly stuff always. So yeah, that's very exciting. Okay, and then one other reflection I wanted to ask, which is a little more just personal to this week or the last week or so. What is a moment in nature or at a zoo or botanical garden maybe you've had in the last couple weeks that brought you some joy?
Do I have to stick to the last couple weeks or can I go
Oh, you could go, sure,
a bit,
go further if you want. Yeah.
bit farther? I would say my top moment in nature ever is when I was on African safari in Kenya right before the Namibia course, and we saw this huge multi-generational herd of African elephants. And then we watched them for like over half an hour. And then we turned away, and then right on the side of the road is a lion and lioness, like as close as this over here. And they were resting when we came, but then they got up. And the thing that is so powerful about being in nature is when an animal chooses to actually look at you. Because they can't ignore you, they can do whatever they want to, but they choose to look at you. And two other very special moments from my EEs is at the last night in Namibia, we had a honey badger come up to where we were celebrating and then chased a genet, which was, yeah, I never thought to see a honey badger in my life, so that was pretty special. Well, also when we found free orangutans up in a tree on a river cruise in Borneo, and they were just doing their thing. And it's the thing I also really liked from my EEs is seeing places where wildlife was living harmoniously among near human development and seeing how it is possible for animals to thrive with each other and around people. Like in Brazil, the golden lion tamarins, most of them live on farmland. In Namibia,
Interesting.
we saw we learned a lot about farmers who lived alongside cheetahs and leopards. And in Borneo, we had communities right around the King of Baton River, but so much wildlife and nature was living alongside it. And I feel like we it's a real paradigm shift in conservation that we need to make is considering that human dimension and helping them live together. I know I went off on a tangent, so I apologize for that.
No, but it's perfect, and it's you're absolutely right. The human it's communities are finding ways to live and coexist and live harmoniously. I love that you use that term with nature, and that's so cool to see. And it's
Oh,
also great, like how in Dragonfly, and I think any sort of graduate program, but where you're with like-minded people, so you get excited just about the honey badger as much as you do about the lions and multi-generational elephants.
oh,
Yeah.
yes, I mean, there's always that you always have some people who are really into plants or really into insects and things that other people don't do. When you go on a on a safari with normal people, they just want to see the big stuff, the ABC animals. Well, when you're with dragonfly people, they really see everything and get excited about everything, which I really enjoy. Back to the harmonious point, a thing that my academic advisor, Jill Koret, said that really stuck with me is it shouldn't be human-wildlife conflict. It's human-wildlife interaction. And because conflict is automatically a negative thing, but really almost every animal interacts with humans in some ways, and it can be a positive. So I think that's important to.
Yeah, that's a very, yeah, conflict as a term, right? How do we switch that exactly to
Yes.
interactions which are neutral or even benefits, right?
Yeah.
Thinking of deer, for example, which most people are like, oh, there's too many deer in my neighborhood eating my hostas and whatever. But the beauty of the deer in your neighborhood, that we are coexisting with. So yeah, it's a little bit of a frame shift for people. Grayson, we're at time, but is there anything else you want to share with listeners?
Just to never take the nature around you for granted, and to that there are people around who have the same passions, questions, and goals that you do. Dragonfly helped me find yours, but they are out there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for all you're doing with Zane and just your support of zoos and aquariums and conservation generally. It's been great talking with you, Grayson.
Thank you.
Hi there, folks. Just one more thing before you head on out. If you have a moment, as I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to hear in what ways you are finding this podcast useful, how you listen, what you would like to hear more of, less of, etc. Please feel free to send me any and all feedback, any ideas for guests, etc. to Kevin Madison at my email, which is mattiskc@miamioh.edu. That's spelled MATTESKC @miamioh.edu. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day.